Hi everybody, Oblivious Benson here, and it's time for another Q&A. You guys seem to like the last one. It, I guess, did the best out of the videos that I've made so far. I figured, let's try and stick with some analytics for now. I don't know. Let's go with what you guys like. You're like a focus group for me, so let's see. Y'all liked that one, and also it was kind of easier to do this as just like a fun side video because after I was on DutyRon, hi, shout out DutyRon, after I was on his channel and Melanie's last live, I did get a good amount of emails from some of you guys reaching out to me, and thank you to all the new channel members. I am still healing from LASIK. I have very sensitive eyes with ocular dermatitis, and so it made the process a little bit longer, so I'm sorry if I blink a lot. I have dry eye right now. But overall, I'm kind of happy with the results. One, my bad eye, the one that I have the metal plate in, is a little bit blurry, almost like someone smudged your glasses. But I heard that is normal for some people. Healing time takes longer, especially when you have ocular dermatitis. It was interesting. It was weird seeing, well, I guess not seeing, vision just going completely black for a second was crazy. But when I got punched in the face, I also experienced that. So I guess I'm used to it. But anyways, yeah, thank you to everybody who reached out to ask me about my LASIK. I was very, very lucky to get it. And I also didn't have to pay for it. So that was nice. In the meantime, those of you who saw me on DutyRon and Melanie's channel, you guys sent me some really good questions. Some of you commented some of the questions in my videos. And I wanted to either respond if I haven't yet, or on some of them I just wanted to kind of extrapolate, if you will. I don't know what the word is, but I wanted to kind of go more in depth on some answers. A lot of the questions were about LISK from the last time I was on Melanie's channel, and about the Savannah Soto, Matthew Guerra, and Baby Fabian case in San Antonio. Because as I expressed on that live with Tio Carlos, God bless him. And by the way, I want to say this because I corrected it in the comments, and I was so embarrassed. But when I did that live, I was so starstruck by Tio Carlos. I love him so much. Mwah. Bless his heart. But he, when he was leaving, I told him, that basically we will protect you the way San Antonio protects Selena. Something like that. What I was saying was protect Selena's name. The way we, you know what I mean? The way we keep her sacred, not because I understand she got killed. And obviously I don't mean we're going to allow Yolanda Saldivar to come after you, Carlos. We would never do that. What I meant was protect and honor his name. We will protect his legacy, if you will. And also protect him as a person, because really just what a gem. If you don't know who Tio Carlos is, look him up in reference to the Savannah Soto case. He's one of the few creators out there at the time who were live and popping, and he wasn't pretending to be a psychic. He was just watching. He was just creeping and watching for all of us Snoopy Doopas out there, and bless him. But after that live, I did get a lot of really good questions about San Antonio. Speaking of being beloved in San Antonio, we had a very beloved figure in San Antonio die this past week. I grew up there and lived there a couple of different times throughout my childhood and adulthood, and I have to tell you that it is a tragedy what happened today. Nacho Estrada passed away. Nacho Estrada and his puppet Maclavio and the Tortilla Monster, may they rest in peace. Jeff Dunham, in my opinion, is just doing Nacho Estrada. Anybody with a puppet is just trying to be Nacho Estrada, because he was the king, dude. And growing up, what he did was he was a ventriloquist. And I'm going to be upfront with you guys. I fucking hate puppets. I hate them. I don't like ventriloquism. I don't like inanimate objects talking at me and telling me about not to do drugs and gang violence. They freak me out. They always have. Scary doll movies, Chucky. My boyfriend loves Chucky and all this stuff. I can't watch. It freaks me out. I don't like dolls talking at me. If you also hate that shit, comment in the chat. It creeps me out. I don't like it. But I loved Nacho Estrada. And I'm talking up until high school. We all loved Nacho Estrada. He was a light in a sea and pit of high school and middle school darkness and elementary school. He would come to our schools and they'd have assemblies, and him and his puppets would get up and they would give a very hilarious stand-up comedy / motivational speaking type of presentation. Like, he was as thrilling to me as Chris Farley as the motivational speaker. He's just crazy and he's very funny. And he would say McClavio, and our teacher would use that as a tool for us, kind of like Heads Up 7 Up, because when he said McClavio, all the kids would have to do something in the auditorium. And this is going to keep us off of drugs, by the way, which is amazing because this is exactly the type of shit you want to see when you're on drugs, right? So we'd sit there and he'd be like, don't do drugs, do this puppet. And then he would say McClavio, and everybody would have to do something goofy, and it was funny. Well, I had this 4th grade teacher who, I think it was 4th or 5th grade. He would scream, like he couldn't get us to shut up in class. So he decided to carry on the enthusiasm from Nacho Estrada and use it as a learning tool, where he would say, like, you know, McClavio. And when he said it, everybody had to put their heads down, like Heads Up 7 Up. And then he would, you know, reward you for whoever did it the quickest. And one time he screamed it out, and I immediately threw my head down, and I ended up knocking myself out. I think that was like my 1st or 2nd concussion. But yeah, that's what I don't remember about Nacho Estrada, but because that shit was fuzzy afterwards. But legit, he was an icon. And aside from him, we had a lady named Patsy Torres who would come in, and she would do she would sing covers of Bohemian Rhapsody and like Janet Jackson songs and Michael Jackson. And then we had Alamo City Heat. They were a bunch of police officers that rocked, and they would play rock music for us and tell us not to do drugs, or they would arrest us. And that was fun. Most schools would have these guys come, and they would rip a phone book in half and be strong and tell you to be strong. We didn't have that. We had singing cops, Latino man with a puppet, and a lady who dressed up like Selena and spun around in dresses and sang songs from the 70s and 80s. So that's what we had. But anyway, Nacho Estrada died today, and it was a tragedy because that man, I thought him and his puppets would live until like 120. He ruled. He's a San Antonio icon and really a Texas icon. Everyone's going to miss him forever. But yeah, on the subject of weird school programs, I'm curious, anybody, please comment on this or even send me a full-blown email. I don't know if it's because I'm very tired from being up early or if it's something in the water, because I'm just now remembering this program we had. It was called Shattered Dreams. Did you guys have this? They faked a car accident in my school, and some of us got to play victims of the car accident. I got to dress up and put blood on and be like a girl who died. They made me put blood on me, and I laid on the ground. And then all these other students did the same. They like would pick us out, and then we'd have to go and we'd play dead kids, and there would be a real wrecked, totaled car that I'm assuming they dragged in from the police station up the road. And this is a small school in Texas, and they had one girl was the drunk driver, and you never know who it was until the day of. And also you never knew when Shattered Dreams was going to happen. Like an alarm went off, and it was like if someone called in a threat to the school or a tornado, it was one of those alarms. So they'd rush everybody out, or like a fire alarm. They'd rush everyone out to the parking lot, and there'd be this fake car accident, but it would look very real because there'd be stage blood and all this stuff. And there'd be a girl screaming, and it was usually the girl who was the biggest drama nerd. And she'd be like, "Oh, my legs." And it was like a horrific, literally a crisis act. And I never say this because I hate when people bring this stuff up, conspiracies about crisis actors, but they literally had us play crisis actors for the day. So kids could see this horrifying experience. It would scare them out of drinking. And it was all about, you know, don't be this guy. And now you have to mourn your friend. And sometimes you'd have like fake funerals. Anyway, I hope they got rid of that program because it gave everybody PTSD, and I think it made some kids drink. But if you guys had something like that at your school, please let me know, because I'm also finding out through emails with you guys that a lot of the things that are normal in Texas are not normal elsewhere, and I'm curious what is trauma and what is normal. So anyway, tell me below in the comments or email me at obliviousbensonquestion@gmail.com. Did you have programs like Shattered Dreams? If it was something similar, email me. And let me point out, by the way, this is how serious they took this shit. They got a helicopter, you guys. And one person in the fake car accident would get life alerted, or not life alerted, that's the button. First of all, they did pull out the jaws of life once to crunch the car to show you what it's like. And the whole time people are fake screaming. We're all, and there's like blood everywhere, like fake blood. Then a helicopter comes, and it picks someone up and does the thing where it carries them to the hospital. And one kid got to get in that and get flown away. And that was like legit. Like they did that just to, it's like Scared Straight, that show. But instead of taking you to the jail, they take you to the worst EMT paramedic scene for a horrible car accident where kids die. Like I remember just thinking it was so messed up as a kid. And now as an adult, I'm like, man, that was fucked up. They put us through that. So yeah, if you had to do that, where are you from and what did they make you do? Okay. Anyway, I want to go over, before we go over the Q&As, this is a Q&A video because you guys sent me a whole bunch of questions. They were really good after those 2 appearances. And then I got some in between and after that were pretty decent that I wanted to respond to. So I went ahead and I made a little list here of all the ones that I thought were important. Some of them we've already been over, and some of them are some emails you guys sent me after. I hope you guys liked it, but the more techie little nerding out videos that I made for you. Some of y'all sent me a couple of interesting questions in regards to internet stuff, and I do have some videos planned that are going to be very fun that I'm going to record next week, where we're going to go over the old internet, and I'm talking how we're going to take stuff from the culture of the 90s to the 2010s. Or 20-teens, however you would say it. How we're going to take stuff from the internet culture back then and from social media, early social media and early internet in general, and how we're going to use that information to maybe get some leads in some cold cases or maybe apply it to some research on cold cases. Because believe it or not, even in the 90s and the early 2000s, there were a lot of interesting social media waves. They weren't called apps back then, but there was a lot going on that had to do with online diaries and things like that. It was a lot of discussion forums, and we're going to talk about some of the most popular ones and how you can retain old data for the purpose of researching everything from the environment to what life was like back then, how people talked, how people operated online. Catfishing was a bit different. Back then, you would just say ASL to someone, and now you got to have this whole backstory, and it's crazy, actually. But yeah, things were very different, and I can't wait to make you that video. I've already done all the research for it for you, and I'm just very excited. But let's get to your questions. Okay. Let's start with, this was a tech one I got before I was on those 2 lives. It's, what is the best subreddit for practicing OSINT? And I really like this one. I think I've already said this, but just for those who didn't stick around to that part of one of the past videos, the best subreddits, if you want to practice OSINT stuff, I would go to RBI. The subreddit is r/RBI. It's the Reddit Bureau of Investigations, and it's people who go and post stuff like, and I'm going to put a picture of it, all of this so you can see it. People who post like, how would I get a license plate here? Or this thing happened to me and I'm trying to figure out how to get XYZ. It's almost like ask a lawyer, but it's more like ask an internet sleuth. And sometimes people give really good advice on where to find specific things, but sometimes people just find it for you. And it's really good if you've been looking for something that you know exists and you can't find it. Another one is called Trace an Object, and I think I showed that to you before, but it's somebody that is, that one, it's posting like a specific item or picture, and you try to help trace what this object, item, picture is, where it's located, and it's to help with ongoing fight against sex trafficking. And it's primarily a lot of like European Interpol-based organizations in European countries and Australian, but a lot of it carries over to America. Essentially, some of these pictures are pictures of persons doing awful things, sometimes to kids on the dark web, but they blur out the kids, or they leave out the victim, and you're just supposed to see the background so that you can help them figure out maybe where this person who took this footage is located. And one time there was a calendar in the background of one picture, and it was definitely from the state of Texas. I immediately was like, oh, that's what that is. And somebody had already beat me to it. They were like, oh, we already turned this in. This is from this part of Texas. And it's like, wow, like it's a good way for people who might be familiar. Like if you worked in the hotel industry a lot, that's a big thing. Like being able to identify a specific hotel lobby can help out unbelievably. And this is one of those subreddits you go to help do that sort of thing. There's also one that's just, the subreddit is r/OSINT, and there's all kinds of new software and new techniques that's posted there every single day, and I highly recommend it. Another one that's fun, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but it's one of my favorite subreddits, and it's called Internet is Beautiful. There's a lot of really handy OSINT tools in there that I don't think a lot of people realize can help with all sorts of things, especially researching cold cases, missing persons, stuff like that. Especially when it comes to tracing online digital trails. It's a very useful one. Okay, next question. This one's about Telegram. And I love this one because I've been wanting to talk at more length about Telegram, but we're not going to get too into it. But it said, why do people use Telegram and how is it legal? Love this one. Telegram is a Russian and Saudi-based company because the headquarters in Saudi and the creators are Russian. They do not give up your data according to them, and they claim to be unhackable. Ironically, the guy who created it just got hacked, and I do believe it's hackable. It's very vulnerable too. And another thing about it is, while they may not store and retain your data, which is a total lie, all of them do. Every single app that says that is either lying or they're lying. But what's interesting to me is that it's completely open. If you have the link, you can get in there. There really is no way to ban unless it's manual from the creator of the conversation. And all it is it's just WhatsApp, pretty much. It's got a link that you can send that's open. It reminds me of Google Docs. If you copy a link and you put share with anybody who has the link, that's the situation. Now, in Matthew's case, because he passed away, he wasn't able to close that link. And again, it has to be done by the person who opened it and started the conversation. So all of that information is forever public. I do think that the fact that it's so wide open and anybody could, that was a perfect example. Anybody could go back and read his conversations. And a lot of people are, I'm not going to say stupid because we're all victims of this at one point or another in our internet journey, but everybody's kind of vulnerable because at one point or another, we all use passwords or screen names multiple times, or reference the same thing multiple times, or use a specific term or spell something wrong multiple times. And that alone is a lead into your identity. And I think that a lot of these people in this recent case with Matthew's Telegram, I know they reused their screen name in multiple places, and that led to them being traced. So we definitely saw a lot of doxing going on because of stuff like that. And I just think that these apps are not necessarily as safe as they tout. They're not really about protecting you. They're about being useful and having people go, we must protect our rights, use this app at all costs, just like TikTok. Could you imagine taking TikTok away from the entire US? It would, I mean, I can tell you this much, put your stock in VPNs if so, because that's exactly what's going to happen. Okay, next question. Sorry, I'm going off. What's the scariest John Doe and Jane Doe case? This question. I knew right away when I read it that I knew what I was going to say, and it's St. Louis Jane Doe. That one freaks me out. First of all, because it was a little girl, and the way she was bound, and the fact that her head was gone, it was chopped off, and they have yet to identify who she is, and it was in a creepy, horrifyingly scary abandoned building in St. Louis, Missouri. It happened in 1983, and they have a yellow sweater to try to trace her and identify her that they put out to the public. They haven't had a lead since 83, I think. This is one of those cases where they keep claiming they do, and they don't. And recently, a user named Finding Janetta posted, I believe it was in Unresolved Mysteries or RBI, but they posted on Reddit about how they've been looking for their little sister, Janetta Brooks, since they were separated at a young age. And every single thing about that post reeked of, oh my God, this sounds just like this Jane Doe. You know what I mean? So everybody was immediately like, go to the police, go to the police. It made it on every news station. I'll play you some clips right now.
Tonight, we're learning exclusive new details about a potential lead in a case that has haunted St. Louis detectives for 40 years. It involves the body of a little girl who was found beheaded in the basement of a vacant building. She remains unidentified, and so does her killer.
Tonight, our Christine Byers explains why homicide detectives are excited about a social media post and how it could finally unlock the answers they've been searching for all this time. We do want to warn you, some of the details and images in this story could be disturbing for some viewers.
You know, on the surface, there certainly seems to be information in that post.
We caught up with St. Louis Police Sergeant Charlie Wall at the vacant lot where this apartment building once stood in the 5600 block of Clemens Avenue. It was vacant on February 28, 1983, when two men told police they went in hoping to find something to fix their car. Instead, they made a grisly discovery when they flicked on a cigarette lighter in the dark basement. The decapitated body of a little girl lying on her stomach.
A cold case of this magnitude, I think at various points over the years, it's received some national attention.
Yes. She was naked from the waist down, wearing only this bloody yellow V-neck sweater. This red and white rope bound her hands behind her back. Her nails were painted red, but sloppy, like any child painting their own nails would do.
It's unimaginable.
And it proved impossible to solve.
Anybody that had anything to do with this case in its early days was doing everything in their power to try to solve it at that point in time. And here we are, this many years later.
10 years ago, police exhumed her remains to do further DNA testing. They've combed through multiple databases that have led to breaks and other seemingly unsolvable cold cases across the country. Nothing has ever clicked in this case. Then, just 1 month ago, this post titled "Trying to Find Missing Sister" by a poster named Finding Janetta on the website Reddit popped up. In it, the author writes she and her older sister had different fathers and lived with their maternal grandmother after their mother went to jail in 1981. The poster says she remembers her sister's father picking her up just after New Year's in 1983 and never letting her or her mother ever see her again. The remains of the little girl, who has become known as Little Jane Doe, were found about a month later. Other specific details from the post include a birth date of May 15, 1973, which would have made her 9 years old at the time she last saw her sister, and within the 8 to 12-year-old age range forensic experts believe the remains fall. A possible name, Janetta Brooks. References to the little girl's father having ties to Terre Haute, Indiana, and St. Louis. Relatives of the child's father confirming that they haven't seen the child since Valentine's Day in 1983 either.
The level of detail that is contained within this post, there seems to be a fair amount of information that could potentially fit with the information that investigators already know.
But whoever Finding Janetta is has gone dark. 5 on Your Side posted a comment asking the author to respond. We haven't heard back, and neither have the police.
You know, we have to hold out hope that there's somebody that knows something, somebody that maybe, just saw a child walking down the street around that time, February 28th of 1983. A little girl in a yellow sweater.
Christine Byers, 5 on Your Side.
We've posted the entire Reddit post on KSDK.com. If you have information on this case, please call St. Louis Police at 314-444-5731. If you'd like to remain anonymous, just call Crime Stoppers at 877-371-TIPS.
So yeah, that is a very scary case. And as far as the scariest Jane and John Doe cases, that's one of them. The other one for the longest time for me was Staten Island Jane Doe. And I believe her name is Christine Belusco, and she had a daughter who is still missing out there. Her name was also Christina Belusco, I believe. And they found Christine's body, and it was still smoldering when they found it one morning, and it was near a mental hospital. It was in Staten Island Jane Doe. It was outside. I believe she was in like an on your knees leaning forward position. They found her still smoldering early in the morning, and she had a hammer under her that had the initials Lloyd L. It had the name Lloyd and then L. There was some cigarettes under her. She had been lit on fire. She'd been beaten. I believe she was strangled. She had a scorpion tattoo. They finally identified her. But what's weird is she was supposed to have a kid with her. She had a 2-year-old daughter, and they never were able to find that daughter. They're still looking for her. Also, her family, she was adopted, and she had just found out, and she decided to go find herself. She was originally from New Jersey. This is what we've learned since. The last place she was seen and had stayed was at this place called the Mount Airy Lodge in Pennsylvania. I think they said it was in like the Catskills or the Poconos, yeah. And then she ends up in Staten Island, dead on fire, beaten with a hammer, strangled. It was a horrible situation. I have been obsessed with that case for a while, but it's very troublesome to me. It makes me very sad. Okay, next question. If I don't see a case in NamUs, but it's on Facebook or in the newspaper, how do I find out if it's still open? I would immediately try to Google the victim and see if there's an obituary or an update for sure. And if you haven't found one, it is totally okay to call the non-emergency line and ask how to get in touch with a detective or how to find out what cases are still open, especially locally. You could also go to the missing persons page for the county that they went missing in or that they're from. I would also always check the newspaper. I would just simply type in their name and put updates. But yeah, if you don't find anything out through your own research, it doesn't hurt to, you could just call the police or county station and just straight up ask, hey, is there a case for this individual? And if they tell you no, then the answer is no. And then that's it. So are there any serial killers you think have more victims than they were charged for? Definitely. Ted Bundy, Israel Keys, Samuel Little, for sure. Otis Toole, Henry Lee Lucas, Kenneth McDuff. They all have murders they didn't confess to, and then they have some that they did that they lied about just to fuck with people, and they're pieces of shit. And I hope that all of those people get justice. Some of these dudes are dead. Actually, all of them are dead now that I think about it. So hope they rot in hell. Okay. Did you know that Lori Vallow's brother, Alex Cox, who helped her, was a stand-up comic? Did you know him? I attached a video of him performing if you haven't. I wanted to get your take on this guy. First of all, thank you. Thank you to whoever sent me that. I laughed, but not for the right reasons. I did not laugh because his comedy was funny. I laughed because it was really bad open micer shit, and it was very hack. If he had a single funny line, I would have laughed at the actual joke. The part that gave me a half chuckle was when he called his brother-in-law a pedo, and I was like, what, dude? Like, the guy you murdered? And also, like, that was the fact that he slipped in his not his alibi, but the fact that he slipped in his statements, his fake stand your ground, like he had to make all that up. You know, the whole reason that he killed his brother-in-law for Lori was over this fake made up story that this guy was a pedo. He thought, hey, you know what? Let's legitimize my statements to the police by writing a bit. Let's write a tight 2 about it. That's crazy as shit. This guy's nuts. His crowd work is bad. It's hack. He gets laughs. That's why I'm never going to go to Albuquerque or wherever the hell he is. I need to look it up. I think it's New Mexico. I don't know. It's bad. I know that the exact place he's in the clip that you sent me, I know that bar, and I feel like it was the same one that was on Bar Rescue. And I don't want to say much more because I know the club owner, but I think it's that one. And I have another friend who works a lot there, and I'm going to ask her. I'm going to ask her if she's ever worked with Alex Cox. That guy is nuttier than a payday shit. That guy's nuts. Like, yeah, it was bad. I did not know him. He was an open micer, obviously. He just did, like, I hope if he was getting paid for this shit, hell no. This is bad. Sorry, I'm cursing a lot. I'm just very tired. Okay. Kat, are there any serial killers like Rex that called or harassed families? Yes, 100%. Yes, there's so many. Probably the most popular is this guy, Larry Jean Bell. There's a little girl named Sherry Smith. There was also a woman named Deborah Helmick. And this was in South Carolina. It was in the 80s. And he kidnapped one of them in broad daylight. That was Sherry. I believe actually both of them in broad daylight. But Sherry, when he kidnapped her, I think she was around 17. And he takes her and he starts doing exactly what Rex did. He starts calling the house and taunting the sister. And he says some really messed up stuff. God wants you to join Sherry Faye. It's just a matter of time this month, next month, this year, next year. You can't be protected all the time. And he would threaten her. He would threaten Sherry's sister on the phone. And they were in touch with FBI profiler John Douglas, very famous profiler. The most famous Mindhunter was made about him. This was one of the first cases where he was there on the scene, actively helping with what they thought was a hostage negotiation. This guy killed her. And he would lie and say that she was barely alive and then say that he killed her. He'd say horrible things to the sister, and it scared the crap out of her, but the sister infamously said, I'll do anything for my sister, and agreed to be used as a lure. Larry Jean Bell was believed to be a serial killer. This was South Carolina in the 80s, so there were a couple of active ones at the time, but he was really scary because he was one of the few up until then who had actually done stuff like this, like called and taunted the family and did a whole "you're next" thing. Before then, a lot of serial killers like Zodiac Killer, BTK, they would call and harass media. Even Israel Keys, he would leave like ransom notes, and he sewed Samantha Koenig's eyes open and left a picture of it with her holding the day's paper, so they thought she was alive. So he would taunt the family by proxy. But even the Weepy Voice Killer, all of these killers, they would call and they would harass the media, or they would harass the police. But Larry Jean Bell was one of the early ones, aside from like Albert Fish. Albert Fish would write letters to this little girl's mother And her name was Grace Budd, and he would say the horrible things that he did to her. He was a horrifying, scary man. Joseph James D'Angelo, he was a Golden State Killer, Iran's, that guy. Terrifying dude. He used to call and do obscene phone calls and breathe really heavy into the phone. Another one was Regina K. Walters' killer, Robert Ben Rhoades. You've heard me mention him in regards to LISK when people have said what other possibilities are there for all the different bones that washed up, and for a lot of the cases that were brought up in regards to Virginia, to Connecticut, to New Jersey. I always say don't forget Robert Ben Rhoades, because this guy drove all over the United States picking up hitchhikers, men and women, and he would torture them in a mobile torture chamber, just like the Toy Box Killer did, but mobile. He went all over the Northeast, all over the South, everywhere. God knows how many victims he had. This guy kidnapped a woman from Pasadena, Texas. I shouldn't say a woman, I should say a girl, because she was 14. Her name was Regina. Her and her boyfriend, Ricky, who was 18. She runs away from home with Ricky one day. The police issued a warrant for Ricky Lee Jones, because he was 18 and they wanted him for something. I don't know what he did. It was a small thing, but I think it could have just been they suspected him of kidnapping her. I believe they did. But in reality, her and him hitchhiked and got picked up by a guy named Robert Ben Rhoades. He was a trucker. And Pasadena's right outside of Houston. This is in the 80s. They get picked up. Robert Ben Rhoades immediately kills Ricky Lee Jones. So now it's just him and Regina, 14. He would write in her diary, her journal, her notebook, and kept some extensive notes that they used to implicate him later when he was eventually caught. But he basically took her through this mobile torture chamber in his truck, his 18-wheeler. He cut her hair off. He forced her to wear a black dress with black heels. And he drove her all the way to Greenville, Illinois. Regina, by the way, was found in a barn. What's significant about this is Ben Rhoades took her to that barn and took pictures of her in the dress. And in the pictures, I'll show you here, trigger warning, they're extremely sad and scary. These are the last pictures he took of her right before killing her in that very barn in the picture. This is probably the most disturbing thing I've ever heard as far as kidnappings go. This is really sick. And it's sad that we have these photos, but this is just how sadistic this piece of shit was. Her bones were found way later in that barn, identified even later than that. But during this whole ordeal, when they were on the road prior to her bones being found, Rhoades would call her dad. He called her dad in 1990, and he basically harassed the dad and said, I know the location where she's located. You'll never know. He was a terrifying dude, and he would always say that, I want to tell you about where your daughter is in person, and then he would never give them a place to go. Him, Albert Fish, Joseph James D'Angelo, they all did this, and Larry Gene Bell, they all did this in the exact same manner that Rex did. They did very sadistic little, I don't want to say monologues because they weren't long, but they, what's the word? They had almost a signature in how they spoke to the family and a routine. Whether it be calling nightly and heavy breathing or, quoting Bible verses at them. There were very specific taunts. Rex's, you hear it in the people who did interviews for that documentary, The Killing Season. They say that he would say she died in a whorehouse in Queens, that he kept saying specific negative things. Your sister is and say something degrading. The commonality is wanting, I think it's that fear to extend to the family. It's the only way to keep torturing a victim that's already gone. Rex having that is extremely sadistic. They're very much about putting people in fear. As far as taunting the media to harass by proxy, there's the Weepy Voice Killer. They call him the Weepy Voice Killer because he's like, I did it again. I'm such a bad guy. It's so scary. Then there's Zodiac, of course. He taunted the media. There's Todd Kolep he basically catfished as the victims. He got control of Charlie, one of the dead guys' phones, and pretended to be him and the girl he kidnapped, Kayla, who he put in a box parked on his property. He was a fat, big, scary realtor, very similar to Rex, actually. And he also openly admitted to these motorbike murders in South Carolina years before that they didn't even ask him about, and they had no clue he did. He just confessed to it. Also had extremely weird mother issues. All these guys, same situation. Russell Williams in Canada, this is one of the craziest ones. He was basically Canadian BTK. BTK, who also communicated with police. Do you see a trend here? The media hungry ones, they communicate a lot with the cops and with media, and they want popularity and notoriety, and they openly admit to their kills. They do it proudly, like Todd Kohlhepp. But the ones who don't seem to really want media are the ones that I mentioned above, like Joseph James D'Angelo still has not openly talked. But yeah, Larry Gene Bell and Joseph James D'Angelo, Albert Fish, and then Robert Ben Rhoades, they were never like huge openly braggy about what they did, but they did some of the worst stuff because they taunted the families directly and made open threats to them. The ones who taunted the media and the police, aside from Zodiac, because he hasn't been caught, were people like Russell Williams, Weepy Voice Killer, BTK, Israel Keys. They were very, very adamant about getting credit. Now, Russell Williams, not so much, but you could tell he knew because he stared directly at the camera during the interrogation, and he tried to kind of put on this front of not really caring and sounding creepy. He was really putting on a show in that interrogation. But what he did was really crazy. He snuck into a woman's house and he stole her panties and her vibrators. And she thought that it was her buddy who lived up the road. She blamed her buddy and was like, come on, admit you did the prank. He's like, no, I didn't. She gets a little creeped out. He agrees. Her buddy says, I'll stay over to make sure nothing happens to you. He stays over time. She gets over it. And then one day, I think it happened again. And what I remember from it is that the guy basically sneaks into her house. He goes into her closet while she's not home. She comes home with her buddy, and they're openly talking about how they think that someone had broken into the house previously and stolen the vibrator, the sex toys, and the underwear, the lingerie. And they're openly discussing this, and Russell Williams is in her closet listening. They go out for the night, and while they leave for the night, he goes into her bedroom, gets on her computer of her bedroom office, and he types a message to her on her open WordPad on her computer. Then he leaves the house, closes the door behind him, and takes off. She comes home later, and when she logged back on her computer, there's a message to her, and it's him referencing something she was talking about while he was in her closet. And then she realizes, oh my God, someone was in my closet because the door's open, she could see. That's terrifying. That is a taunt, in my opinion. He ended up not killing her, obviously, but he killed his coworker who was in the Canadian Air Force right after this woman, Marie-France Cuomo. And there's a famous dateline of that. And Russell Williams was a freaking creep. He taunted from within your, like, the killer is in your house, like Scream. That's terrifying. He also was a famous higher up in the Air Force who, like, openly bragged about transporting the Queen. This guy was very trusted, had a very high security clearance, and he killed an officer, Marie-France Cuomo, who he knew. He stalked this other woman from within her house and then let the neighbor take the blame, this sweet old man whose life was ruined. And he would do creepy shit. He would sneak around, touch your stuff. It reminds me of Rex in Attorney Mel's Live, when the one where we met, the first one I was on, where the poker dealer says that Rex would say, what if there could be someone sleeping with your husband right now in your bed? Remember when he said that to the poker lady? She said, that's the, like, taunting with, like, hypotheticals of someone doing something horrible to you. That is the kind of guy that Russell Williams was to the victims. Because the question, though, was, were there any that are like Rex and specifically harass the family? I had to give you the four worst. It's definitely Joseph James D'Angelo, Golden State Killer, Albert Fish, Larry Gene Bell, and Robert Ben Rhoades. I'm also going to link in the bottom of this. I have so many links. I'm going to link in the bottom of this. There's a fantastic piece written by this woman who got picked up by Robert Ben Rhoades. I believe it was in the East Coast. It might have even been like New York or Virginia, somewhere like that. But she got picked up by him and escaped him trying to kill her. And he looks like a real weirdo. He looks like Ernest Goes to Camp if his eye was all... Remember when his eye was like he looks like a real fucking weirdo. Very Henry Lee Lucas-y with the bad eye. Which, you know, no hate, I have a shitty eye. But this guy looks like he's literally like, like... Do you remember the old Popeye cartoons where he's like got the huge muscles and he's making the sausage on the beach and Sinbad rolls up and Popeye's all fucking mad and he's squinting his eye? That's what Robert Ben Rhoades looks like. He looks like 1980s Popeye cartoons on VHS. Pat, is there a way to search for an alias when I'm looking through criminal records? Yes, there is in some jurisdictions. Just like we were talking about earlier with the county clerk stuff, you can usually go through that same portal, the Odyssey portal, or whichever one is on your county clerk site. Sometimes when you're going through court records lookup, it'll give you an option. You can do a case search, or you can also do a search by party name. Anytime you see party name, you click on that, and usually, especially if it is a criminal record search or a court record search, it will say alias included, and you click that box. Now, if you don't see that box, go back to the main page for the clerk site, go into the little search section where it usually has like a magnifying glass, type the word alias in that. You're going to be surprised at how many different places it's just not readily available to you. You just don't see it on there, or it's really small, or you have to go through a bunch of links to get to it. If you go to the main source page for the search, it's usually like whatever the city is.gov. You can type in alias and you're going to see all the different links that they have within that website with a portal with which to search aliases. So if that option is available, I would put it in there. Simultaneously, I would go on Judy Records and I would put the name of the person with a comma and then put their alias and see if anything pops up there, especially if you're looking for something that's all over the U.S. as opposed to just a specific state or spot. I hope that answers your question. All right, folks, we're going to wrap it up here pretty soon, but I wanted to point out, because I'm sure you've probably noticed by now that at certain points in this video, my makeup has changed, maybe my hair has changed, maybe the lighting has changed. And you're like, what's going on here? Does she keep pausing it and changing her hair and makeup? No, I recorded this over the course of a couple of days, namely because every single time I'm making a video, that's when it starts to rain and thunderstorm and lightning outside, or that's when my dog decides to come over and sit next to me and go, oh, oh, oh. And then I have to take a moment and I have to stop. Simultaneously, I'm back in school again. I'm still working on my PI certification. I'm also working on several cases on the side voluntarily. And I am enjoying life, just trying to live and trying to get some sleep, and I can't get enough sleep. So I'm so sorry that this is broken into a whole bunch of bits. I'm sure that you guys don't mind. But just in case you were like, what the heck is going on there? That's kind of weird. I did actually record this over a couple of days. And I also got some emails in between that led me to add more questions on that I wanted to answer. Namely, some of them, quite a few of them, were about Vince McMahon. A lot of you guys know that I'm a big wrestling fan, probably, because I'm sure I've mentioned it or Melanie's mentioned it. I am a huge wrestling fan, but the allegations that you guys brought up, I do have answers to your questions. I wanted to add it into this video. I ended up taking it out because my response was like 35 minutes long and I hadn't even cut the mustard on it yet. There is so much to say, and one of the things that I wanted to do for you, and I'm going to try this, I'm going to see how it works because I do think it would be helpful, is I noticed that almost everybody talking about the Vince situation, they say, did you read the full 67 pages? And the response is almost always no. Maybe 3 or 4 times I've seen people say, yes, I got through it, because it is a very long criminal complaint against him. It's worth the read if you're going to discuss it. If you're going to be discussing it openly and educating people about it and you haven't read it, then what the heck are you doing? Like, you're doing a disservice to everybody. I think it is imperative that people read it, the whole thing. However, I also understand that reading is incredibly boring to some people. So I think it would be a useful tool for some people who perhaps don't have the time to read, or they prefer to listen, or they ingest information better listening, to just read it out for you in full, in whole, so that you can hear it, so that you don't have to go find it, look it up, and sit down and consume it. When you could be like, I don't know, vacuuming the house, doing some cleaning, catching up on folding. I mean, everything I'm listing is chores that I need to do. But perhaps you just want to have it read to you in a voice that is not completely monotone. I recognize that sometimes I can sound a little bit like this, but I can try to read it to you in a way that isn't going to put you to sleep, in a way that you can hear the actual evidence laid out before you in this criminal complaint, so that you can hear the exact words of the criminal complaint and not an interpretation filtered through someone who maybe didn't read it. Simultaneously, I'm going to put that on its own video, and it's literally going to be like book on tape form, because believe it or not, your girl's recorded a couple of things like book on tape and some audio commercials. I've done voices of characters on TV. I think that I can pull off 67 pages. I love to talk. I have no problem with it. If you want to listen to it, it's going to be up on my channel soon. Simultaneously, I want to answer your questions. Now, in order to answer the questions I got about Vince McMahon, which all seem to be the same one, but there were variations of it. I had a couple of people that were just asking me about wrestling in general, and a couple of people who are like, you know, how do you reconcile yourself with being a fan and him doing that? Just curious. And it's like, man, that's a hard one. I have answers for you on that. I think I'm going to have to do a video where I just read the whole complaint, and then I'll make a video where I summarize it and give you my opinions on it, because I don't want to get sued, and they're very good at suing up at the WWE. So before I wrap this video up, I wanted to tell you that. I wanted to say thank you one more time. Again, if you want to email me, send me any questions, especially anything that has to do with OSINT, anything that has to do with true crime, anything that has to do with wrestling, I'm always down for. But again, Fraser Manifestos, people, let's keep them coming. All right. Before I go, I'm going to wrap it up with a couple of more of your questions that I've gotten since I recorded the last bit of video. One of these is from the same person who sent me another question, and she's just, I love emailing her and I love talking to her. I think she's got really great insight on things. She did a FOIA, and this is what she asked me. She said, I FOIA'd a case recently and I didn't get back any information. All they sent me was a link. When I clicked on the link, it sent me to a rejection letter that said that it's an active case, but it's over 20 years old. Any idea why that happened or what I could do beyond FOIAing again? What did I do wrong? I told her straight up. I was like, listen, you can appeal it. It's likely going to get rejected because in her case, she's not a very close friend to the person. She's not family to the person involved, the victim. If you don't have the resources to get an attorney, be willing to go sit down with the mediation and the appeals team should they accept your appeal, because you'd have to appeal it. You're going to end up spending some money. But if you're willing to do that and to go sit down and do a mediation for an appeal, if they grant you one, then it could be worth the fight. If it's a case that's very important to you that you've been working on for a long time, I would simply appeal it. Simultaneously, before I appeal it, if I were you, I would try to contact the lead detective, if you haven't already, who's working on the case, or somebody representing law enforcement at the specific county that the case resides, because you would be surprised how many detectives are very open to discussing their caseload. They might have auto-rejected it simply because it's an active case and the person in charge of that department who receives the FOIA requests or FOIA requests likely looked at it, said it's an active case, and rejected it outright. Simultaneously, the detective themselves might be interested in seeing what you have or hearing why you want that information if you're a journalist. They might be wanting to use you to get information out about the case. They could likely give you information that you very well need. They could reject you, but I would check there first. The second thing I would do is I would go double check old news footage, especially if it's a cold case. I would check old news footage, see what's out there, because there have been a couple of cases that I myself couldn't get FOIA information on. I couldn't get anything from them. And I was very precise. And that's another thing. Let me sidetrack here. If you're doing a FOIA or a FOIA request, I said this in my FOIA video, you have to be extremely specific. If you're looking for a 911 call, you need to know what time, what date, and I'm talking the exact time or at least within a close range. But you need to know the time and the date of the call. You might even want to do right by yourself just to put within 5 minutes. You're going to need to know specific names. You're going to need to ask, I want body cam specific footage from this date and this time featuring this specific person. You're going to want to say, you can't just say, I want the case file for this case. If the person has multiple cases, they can reject you because of that. They can say, oh, you said this case involving this person. Well, we've got 9 cases involving this person. Rejection. Sometimes if you get rejected and they don't absolutely 100% tell you it's because this is an open, active case, then you might want to look into the whys, because the whys are usually specificity related. So make sure that whatever you're looking for is dead ass what you're looking for, and be extremely specific. If you have case file numbers, show the case file numbers. If you don't have the case file number, but you know the person's name involved, try looking it up through the local court clerk site. Simultaneously, make sure that you have your county and your jurisdiction correct. Some people will just put Dallas, but really a crime occurred in Richardson, which is right outside of Dallas, or Plano, which is also north of Dallas. You have to be very, very specific. You also want to make sure you're looking for information from the right department. You might say that this happened in San Antonio, and really it happened in Alamo Heights or Converse, which is a small jurisdiction within, or Leon Valley, like for the Soto case. If you're looking for body cam footage on a case that has not gone to court yet, you're not going to get that. You get body cam footage after it is released to the public, usually via the courts. Like, for example, if you have a case with a person who did something horrible and what they did is on that body camera, and that body camera is evidence that's going to be released during the trial, you're likely going to be able to see that after the trial. So just remember, you might get rejected for a number of reasons, but it's usually due to specificity, it's due to timing, or it's due to it being an active case. With that said, if you've been specific, if you gave all the right information, if you got a rejection that tells you it's because of an active case, the best possible thing you can do is go back again and look at what's already out there, especially if you go, well, then how did this news station report this thing and say that it was from the case file if they didn't have the case file? If you guys haven't released it to the public, then how did they have it? Usually that's because it was leaked to them somehow, or a long time ago they were able to grab it before it went private. In Texas, a lot of records went behind a Texas DPS paywall all of a sudden. This was, I believe, around 2020. So there were records that pre-2020 I could easily get. Between 2001, between 9/11 and 2020, when Freedom of Information Act happened in 2020, I could get a number of cases from Texas. Easy peasy, at my fingertips, freezy. Then 2020 happened, and a lot of documents went behind a Texas DPS paywall where you have to pay $1 per document. I think this is shit. I think it is fundamentally wrong. And I think, pardon my French, it's a little up, and I don't like that. However, sometimes the information you're looking for is behind the paywall. So go to your state websites for your state government and see if that's so. If it's not so, then you're going to want to go to the news archives for whatever station reported it that you think had the records, right? Go watch and pause any chance you get. If it's like a video footage report of news footage of, whatever, they always show like the front of an affidavit on it. One time I got information because I paused that and I read, and it had the case number that wasn't blurred out. And then I read a block of the text and I went, if they have it and FOIA is rejecting me, what the heck, dude? So I took it, and in quotations, I read off what was in the still screenshot. I read off and I typed that into Google in quotations. and I typed in PDF after the quotes. And the first thing that popped up was one remaining PDF link that I was able to get. It was available still. You clicked on it. It was through a really old link from a news site that was 2007. Now, usually they reuse that server space and they'll just change URLs to other things. And you might click on a news report that's from 2007 and it's going to give you a totally different recent news story. And you're like, hey, what the heck? And it's because the title was the same: man kills woman in bank robbery. Now it's been replaced with this new data. You can still go on Wayback Machine. You can still click those links, and sometimes they still work, especially within that portal. Now, in my case, this old link was still available. The PDF pops up. I download it, and now I have a whole case file that nobody else can seem to find. It was perfect. It worked out. So what I would do is I would go try to see what media is out there touting whatever file that I need. I would look at the top. You can also see if there's a case number on it. You can go to that district or that county or that state portal, and you could try to use it and run it through there. You can usually search by case numbers through these portals. And when I say portals, I'm talking about, like, Texas has this thing called the Odyssey portal. I believe in Michigan, it's called Otis. That's like the offender portal. Like, there's different platforms, if you will, or portals to search stuff through. I would go try the county clerk specifically. I would try public records, criminal records. Remember, if it's a criminal case, if you're looking for probate records, they're going to be under probate. If you're looking for criminal or public, those are all separated differently. So you're going to want to make sure that you know the district court. If you don't know that, you're going to have to find that. And you're going to have to do that by going into, there's literally 10 portals per county here in Texas on some of them. You can get land records. You can get birth and death certificates. In some places, you have to pay for birth and death certificates. In some, they're free. And in others, they won't give them to you unless it is you. So just keep that in mind. But I wouldn't give up. I would keep searching, go through old media, see what's been put out there. And just because you can't get it now doesn't mean you can't get it at all. You can also call the old news reporters. You can email them, contact them. You can contact the station. Find out what happened to this footage. What happened to this paperwork? Is there anywhere that they can direct you to find out where they got it? I would definitely do that. One thing is for sure, though. Always try re-FOIAing again a few months later. There have been times, this has happened to me twice, where I FOIA'd something, I got rejected, I waited a month, I did it again, and for some reason it worked. Could happen for you. Okay, moving on. Okay, this is a fun one. Somebody pointed out to me that they saw something in the background of one of my videos. And they wanted to know if it was a piece of true crime memorabilia. And they were dead on. This, let me pull it out, is what they were talking about. Let me put this in front of the screen. Can you see it? All right. This is my Lorena Bobbitt Weenie Whacker set. Yes, I do have some true crime memorabilia. A lot of this is from gifts that people have given me because they know that I'm into true crime and cold cases and stuff like that. This is crazy. Look at this. To love, honor, and cherish, or else. The Weenie Whacker. It is a real knife. I love this thing. It was a gift. I couldn't believe that it existed. I think it's fascinating. I really enjoy it. Now, Lorena Bobbitt, I was always free Lorena Bobbitt. I always thought she was a baddie, and let me tell you why. This woman went through hell from that douchebag, and we're not even going to say his name. But she did something that to most people seemed horrific. How could you do this? How could you do this? This woman was a perfect example of what happens when someone gets abused to their breaking point. I think that she is an incredibly strong lady for everything that she endured. I am so glad that she's alive and that she got out of that relationship. I think it's pretty sick that people capitalized on it in such a way. However, I also find this thing to be somewhat empowering, and I've been stabbed. I have no reason to think knives are cool or okay, and I don't. But when I look at this thing, I think, wow, what a weird time in history. Like, what a weird moment that I remember. I was a kid when that stuff happened. I remember watching that on the news, and I remember watching like baby Jessica. I don't know if you guys remember that. She was a little girl here in Texas who fell down a well and got stuck, and it was all over the news. It was like, I don't even remember. I don't know if it happened around the time of Branch Davidian stuff, but for some reason in my memory, I remember Branch Davidian stuff and that and a couple of other news stories being really big in my youth. But being too young to really understand them. Let's just say that. Another thing that I have that's true crime memorabilia related, I may as well show you guys, is this. This is a Mark Jackson basketball card. And what's interesting about this is these fellows right here. Those are the Menendez brothers. Remember them? Yep. I got a Menendez brothers card. That was their alibi, actually, I believe. That was part of their alibi. Or it was found out later and made to be part of their alibi. But I remember everybody at the time thought these dudes were, you know, batshit crazy and did this horrible thing because they were spoiled and because, you know, they were elitist snobs who wanted all of their parents' money. But then again, we find out the 90s were pretty fucked up, weren't they? Those kids were obviously very, very abused. And I found the testimony that they went through to be horrible. They made them relive this over and over for everybody. And they literally laughed at the idea that men could be sexually assaulted. They laughed at them in court as they're crying. And I just found that to be so disturbing. And again, I see, just like Lorena Bobbitt, I see these guys as kind of survivors, if you will. That doesn't mean what they did was right in any way. But I mean, you know, we can all have our own opinions. But let's just say when Satonia Brown shot her trafficker, I didn't go, oh, poor trafficker. You know what I mean? However, I don't think it's right to just kill someone willy-nilly. Simultaneously, these are victims of abuse. I kind of find these two gifts to be a little empowering to look at, to be honest with you. And, you know, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'll catch a lot of flack for that. This is another one that I got, and these are very rare. Ooh, I just hit my microphone. This is The Phantom Prince, My Life with Ted Bundy by Elizabeth Kendall. This is the original copy, not the reprint that came out with the Ted Bundy movies. And this specific book is a book club edition, but it's a first edition, which were the only ones that were put out, and they were in limited print. And that was Ted Bundy's fiance. And she put it out through a Seattle printing press, specifically because it was limited print, and it was her way of not really coming out and speaking on the news because she was still terrified, but her way of kind of, I guess, reconciling herself with what happened. Because remember, she stood by Ted Bundy even after he kidnapped Carol Duranch and was found guilty and escaped and then went to Florida. That's when she was like, oh, hell no. And she got away from him because she realized, like, he is who they say he is. You know what I mean? She didn't believe that at first. He was so good at manipulating her. And again, she was a big victim of abuse, in my opinion, as was her daughter, who Ted Bundy attempted to help raise, in his words, when in reality, he was abusing these women. She wrote that book because it was, at the time, her only means of communicating with the world. It was the only opportunity she had to have a controlled voice that wasn't edited to make her look like another one of Bundy's psycho stalker women who were in love with him, because she wasn't. She was brokenhearted. She felt obviously like a fool, as she herself points out in there. Like, she felt horrible. She felt duped. She felt bad for these women. She recognized that he was a monster, but no one would really give her that opportunity. And I think that that's why she wrote that book. Those were the tones that I was getting from it. It was her perspective, her right to write it. And because of the limited print and how cheap it was at the time and how restricted she kept it, I truly don't feel like she was trying to profit off of the crime so much as get her words out there, and then that's enough. You know what I mean? So I used to work in rare books for a couple of years, believe it or not. I've had a lot of jobs. One of them, I somehow ended up in the rare book section of a bookstore. I already love collecting rare manuscripts and books and things like that. Most of them are historic stuff. I have a Domingo Leal book about the Canary Islands from, the Institute of Texan Cultures that I purchased online. It's insanely rare. And I've got like a Herman Mendenhall put out a copy of Fall of the House of Gacy, even though that book was completely cut off from being printed. There's very few copies. One of them's, I think the only original one in existence is in the Chicago Public Library. And then they put out a limited press of a couple of hundred of them, and I got one of them. When I come on to things like this, if someone gifts it to me or if I see it available for purchase, I will nab it up for the sake of reading it. I think books are the eyes to the soul. And sometimes if you want to learn about fucked up people with fucked up souls, you got to read fucked up books. There are some items that I would never, like I would never buy a skin lamp or anything like that. That's crazy. But I do think that some of these pop culture memorabilia products that come out, stuff like the Burn Bundy Burn shirt, I'd probably get that, honestly. Like, I think that it's really fascinating, and in a way it's kind of one of those things where I can reread this book over and over and kind of have a view of behavioral analysis through the victim's eyes as a reference when studying these people. And I think it's very interesting how many people out there do collect things like this. And I'm curious if you have any. There are some things I would like. There are some items I've had 2 things that I was gifted that made me sick to look at just because they were about a killer that I someone gave me a book once that had information in it about Bittaker, which I think is one of the worst serial killers of all time. He's horrible. And just the fact that his name was referenced on the back part, I would glance over and see, I just got rid of the book. I was like, I didn't want to see it every day. You know what I mean? And this is one of those things that, like, it's from the victim's perspective, and I don't mind seeing it every day. But I think that those 3 items are probably the 3 craziest things I own, or weirdest or rarest things, I guess. I don't know. I think the Weenie Whacker, you can still get some on eBay, but I have the Menendez card just because I found it so fascinating, and I think they do make reprints. I also have I have a baseball card that has it's Ripken Jr., I think it's his son or his grandson. He was a big douchebag to people in baseball, and someone pranked him by switching out his bat and writing fuckface or something on the bottom of it. And he didn't know it, and he went and he took pictures for his first card, and then they noticed, oh my God, it has this word written in it, and they stopped print on those cards and had to reprint all new ones that didn't have that bat on it. And I have one with that bat on it. And I don't even like baseball. I just thought it was funny. So yeah, that is a Weenie Whacker set. I showed you some other true crime memorabilia that I have. I'm curious if you have any. It is a weird niche. I think it's a weird niche for me too because, I'm not a rich person, so I don't really spend my money on many things. I do spend my money on a lot of like wrestling stuff, food, books, and music. But I think that those items, the ones that were gifts, were totally great gifts for me. And the other ones, I just, I had to get them. I just thought they were weird. I liked them. I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you think it's not cool or weird to have stuff like that? Or do you think that it's, some people have their niche and that's just a thing they like? Do you have anything true crime related? Did you save any news articles or anything from history? I've also got above me on this side. See that? That's the People magazine cover of Selena. My boyfriend's sister gave me that. It's from the weekend Selena died. And I remember crying on the school bus about that. We loved her growing up. She was the best. So yeah. Yes, that is my Weenie Whacker set. I'm glad you noticed. Anyway. Yeah. I think that's it. The only other questions that I've got are Savannah Soto and LISK ones. And again, that's going to have to be another video. We're going to do a part 2. That's going to be mainly Savannah Soto and LISK. So if that's what you're interested in, you're going to want to move on to part 2. This has been part 1. Also expect the affidavit for Vince McMahon. the live reading to come out. I'm going to do that. I'm just going to read it all for you, and then I'm going to give you my opinion in a separate video. And then we've got our cold case coming up. So all of these will be dropping in the next 2 weeks. Boom, 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 back to back. And then we're on safe sailing with content for a while. I'm going to start putting out stuff more regularly as soon as I get in the loop on all this. I'm trying my best, people. I'm trying to get into a routine. It's not working, but I'm going to keep trying because I don't want to give up on you. If you look below this video, you're going to see a bunch of links to a lot of the stuff we talked about. If you have any questions or comments, you can put them below. You can email me at obliviousbenson question@gmail.com. I love you. Thank you. Good night.